No UFC fighters ever died. Many boxers have died. And it looks to be much more violent than boxing. And Dana tells me because they take so many shots to the face.
And there's also no other options to preserve yourself, to protect yourself. So if you get hit in a UFC fight, you can try to take the fight to the ground. You get options. Yeah. Also, you don't get allowed to get knocked down and then get back up. When you get knocked down, you're concussed. If a guy's really hurt, they could be finished on the ground and the fight's over.
With boxing, you get dropped and the ref's like, all right, you got 8 seconds to be able to be good.
So here's what blows my mind. Picture this scenario where a fighter gets rocked and dropped hard. In most combat sports, that ref would step in immediately. But imagine if they actually gave that dazed fighter 10 whole seconds to stumble back to their feet. That's some next level brain damage territory right there.
You can kind of run away and survive until the bell rings. Yeah. They're only 3-minute rounds, and then you start again. So you're
Alright, so you've probably heard all the political chatter about Trump, Joe Rogan, and this whole debate surrounding UFC dangers. Look, politicians throwing their opinions around about fight sports? That's been happening forever. Nothing groundbreaking there. But let's slice through all the political theater, the clickbait headlines, and the grandstanding, and focus on what genuinely creates risk in combat situations using real measurable data.
He got after the first UFC. This is the bloodiest, most brutal spectacle in the history of mankind.
It was one of those things you kind of wanted to watch, but, you know, didn't know if you should be.
It was basically old marketing by the old owners just to make it sound crazy.
If SEG made one key mistake, it was pissing off the wrong American hero.
Well, eventually Senator John McCain stepped in.
What it was at the beginning was human cockfighting.
This revelation is about to completely flip your understanding of fight sports on its head. Here's the thing that'll shock you. Everyone assumes UFC is this savage bloodbath where rules don't exist, and competitors are literally attempting murder. But when you examine the actual statistics and regulations governing these fights, reality paints a totally different picture than public perception suggests.
I mean, I've seen people repeatedly getting smashed in the face with a guy sitting on top of him. That's not a sport.
He said, what are you doing? You can't go put on fights that aren't regulated by the Athletic Commission.
There was no referee. There was nothing. It was terrible.
What most people miss entirely is how MMA's diverse finishing options like wrestling exchanges, chokeholds, and ground control dramatically minimize extended brain punishment compared to traditional boxing. And we're talking massive differences here. These varied techniques force earlier stoppages. They provide athletes multiple escape routes to survive encounters without absorbing continuous head strikes, essentially shielding competitors from the accumulating trauma that creates those devastating endings we've witnessed repeatedly in boxing's tragic timeline.
The owner basically said, trust me when I say this. I've been in business for a long time. You can't mess with the government. Tell the government you're not going to do what they want you to do. See what happens.
McCain leads a campaign to ban the UFC across the U.S. He pressures cable companies to stop showing UFC events.
John McCain to ban Ultimate Fighting, taking it too far.
When that happens, Gracie...
Your vision might seem clearer after getting up, but does your brain actually recover from that punishment? When a fighter's in serious danger, that's where everything changes.
So now, the cable companies wouldn't put them on pay-per-view. The ATM machine was cut off.
Check this out. Those are the revenues of the UFC per event from UFC 1 to UFC 27. Little did Bob know, the two guys who would end up saving his ass were sitting right there at UFC 27. And one of them prepared his entire life for that moment.
Now this part really exposes the crucial safety differences between these combat formats, and this perspective becomes incredibly eye-opening. Boxing's recovery period, those 8 seconds to regain composure, that standing count system frequently sends concussed athletes, someone whose brain just got scrambled, right back into battle to receive additional punishment, more devastating blows, building dangerous cumulative trauma layer by layer.
So I was involved in boxing, then I had boxing gyms.
And it doesn't take long before trouble finds them.
One day I'm actually in there teaching a class, and these guys literally walk right into the middle of the class. And they're like, hey, we need to talk to you. And I said, I'm teaching a class here. And they're like, we need to talk to you outside. They start asking me if I know who they are.
This isn't about courage or fighting spirit or warrior mentality. This concerns repetitive brain damage, the type of ongoing neurological injury that researchers now link directly to severe long-term cognitive issues. UFC operations follow entirely different safety principles though. The system prioritizes immediate fight termination when competitors become defensively helpless, when they lose the ability to protect themselves effectively.
Went into my office at like 8 o'clock at night, And we bounced a zillion different concepts around, and that's the one we came up with. So all these guys live in a house. For those of you that don't know, they're coached by two big stars in the UFC. Every time you fight and you lose, you get eliminated.
It's about, do you want to be a fighter? Anybody who says they don't, I don't want you here.
And it would end with a finale. Two guys fight in the finale. One guy becomes the Ultimate Fighter and gets a contract with the UFC.
The idea is to use reality TV as a Trojan horse to sneak MMA on cable TV.
But at the end of every episode, there's a live fight. You know what I mean? There was a fight that would be on TV.
This apparently more savage sport featuring ground strikes, sharp elbow techniques, and visually brutal endings actually prevents the recurring head damage that makes boxing statistically deadlier over time. Sounds backwards, but science supports this conclusion. These contrasting fighter protection approaches fundamentally reshape how we should evaluate combat sport safety.
Investment the brothers were putting in.
This is it. We're going to give this thing a shot. If it works, good. If it doesn't, that's a wrap. It's over.
So we're $44 million in the hole, and we're out trying to pitch this thing to television.
This footage transports us to UFC's prehistoric era, literally marketed with that most violent, bloodiest spectacle slogan they actually promoted with enthusiasm. Understanding this early anything goes period, this lawless frontier of unrestricted combat is what formed public opinion.
They're terrified to put this thing on. That's the other thing. In the television business, nobody has any balls.
We ultimately found Viacom's Spike Network,
calling themselves the Men's Network. We're like, oh, this is perfect for us, the network for men.
Honestly, this gave enormous firepower to opponents like Senator John McCain, who wanted complete shutdown. That shock value promotion, the intentional focus on carnage and savagery, with zero regulatory control, created an extremely dangerous image that required literally decades of dedicated effort to overcome in mainstream consciousness.
Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin. So these two guys come out, light heavyweights, and they put on the sickest fight you have ever seen in your life.
And numbers during the fight went just like this.
The place is going crazy.
People were stomping their feet, and it sounded like a train was going through the arena. And at the end of the fight, people were chanting, one more round, one more round.
Yeah. We ended up giving both guys a UFC contract that night, which made the place even go crazier.
These initial danger concerns weren't manufactured media drama. Real hazards existed during those primitive events based on actual occurrences in early competitions. This became a crushing barrier, nearly impossible to overcome for UFC's transformation into legitimate sanctioned competition that regulatory bodies would approve.
It didn't matter if we did another deal with Spike TV or didn't do another deal. We did it. We made it. We were going somewhere.
Yeah. We literally got up out of our chairs, walked out into the alley, and cut the deal for season 2.
We cut a new deal on a napkin.
I know that sounds...
When Senator McCain explained his human cockfighting comparison, understanding his perspective becomes essential. This wasn't political grandstanding or headline grabbing. This wasn't manufactured controversy for media attention. He identified genuine problems during those early lawless periods of unrestricted fighting that raised legitimate concerns.
And we met with California, Nevada, New York, New Jersey, and the list goes on and on. And we went to these state athletic commissions and said, this is a real sport. These guys are real athletes. I mean, I had to fly to places and literally had to wait outside people's offices for them to come out and grab them. They didn't want anything to do with the UFC.
What's your superpower there?
That I'm a savage. I get out there and I'll outwork anybody.
But Dana also puts a team on its feet.
Continuous ground strikes without referee intervention, zero official oversight when fighters suffered obvious injury, inconsistent regulations across different promotions. This uncontrolled brutality justified public fear and governmental prohibition efforts. This demonstrates how any combat sport lacking adequate regulation and medical supervision, whether primitive MMA or unsanctioned boxing or street violence, becomes extraordinarily hazardous, potentially fatal. The crucial distinction as this narrative develops involved the legitimization process and establishing comprehensive safety standards that completely revolutionized the entire sport. David abandoned SCG completely. The fallout from negative publicity and resulting political pressure created absolute catastrophe for the organization. McCain's crusade against combat sports triggered massive nationwide prohibitions, state governments systematically banning events, strangling UFC economically and socially, eliminating every growth opportunity. This transcended simple public relations challenges they could manage through better messaging. This wasn't minor bad publicity or unfavorable coverage. This represented total survival crisis for the industry, genuine emergency situation. The sport faced systematic legal elimination, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, regulatory body by regulatory body, because society viewed it as excessively dangerous and lawless, too primitive for modern civilization. This footage demonstrates how dangerously close UFC came to total extinction, to becoming merely a historical curiosity in fighting annals. Everything stemmed from their original public image and the subsequent government suppression that exposed undeniable early safety failures nobody could dismiss. This left Bob Meyrowitz completely alone managing UFC operations. When cable providers eliminated pay-per-view distribution, cutting off their financial lifeline, their dependable income source, UFC entered critical condition, surviving barely through desperate measures. These previously profitable revenue channels that sustained early events vanished entirely, creating near bankruptcy conditions, legitimate financial emergency where basic expenses couldn't be covered. This economic devastation wasn't mismanagement or poor strategic decisions. This directly resulted from the sport's failure to escape its brutal human cockfighting reputation, the toxic brand association that followed everywhere. Original owner Bob Meyrowitz found himself completely alone and frantic, unable to secure partnerships or corporate backing, illustrating the enormous challenge facing anyone bold enough or insane enough to attempt reviving a sport so universally condemned, so completely rejected by respectable American society for its apparent dangers and civilized standards' absence. Dana relocated from Vegas to Boston to begin teaching boxing fundamentals. Before Dana White transformed into UFC's aggressive public face, the bold promoter everyone recognizes today, he was deeply embedded in boxing culture, operating training facilities and instructing the sweet science to promising fighters. This professional foundation proves absolutely essential for understanding his approach to solving UFC's massive problems. He grasped combat sports complexities from ground-level experience, training philosophies, required discipline, psychological elements, and crucially, the inherent risks in elite-level fighting. This background in established combat sports, disciplines already legitimized and regulated properly, provided unique perspective on structuring and promoting fighting in ways athletic commissions and audiences would embrace. Somewhat ironically considering later developments, this led to encounters with figures like Whitey Bulger, demonstrating the dangerous underworld he navigated in Boston before sanitizing MMA's image and achieving mainstream success. That concluded everything. Here's where the Fertitta brothers and Dana White demonstrated true brilliance, where their business intelligence really emerged, converting major weakness into powerful strength. They recognized that danger perception, while creating massive sanctioning and broadcasting obstacles, also generated certain audience fascination, curiosity factor they could leverage strategically. The Ultimate Fighter became their stealth weapon, ingenious marketing strategy to reintroduce MMA into mainstream television, not as violent spectacle that would repel advertisers, but as captivating human storytelling that viewers could emotionally connect with. By highlighting fighter backgrounds, personal challenges and histories, individual personalities beyond mere toughness, and intensive training requirements, they systematically destroyed the human cockfighting stereotype piece by piece, substituting legitimate sport narrative, extraordinary athleticism, and commitment that audiences could appreciate and respect. 10 million invested in that venture. We desperately approached everyone possible, completely unable to find anyone interested. Despite implementing the revolutionary Ultimate Fighter strategy, despite this ingenious approach, the legitimacy struggle continued far from finished. Victory remained distant. This footage perfectly illustrates the desperation and overwhelming challenge Dana and the Fertittas confronted during those difficult periods. Television networks remained absolutely petrified of MMA broadcasting, still traumatized by its human cockfighting history and regulatory consequences they witnessed other networks experience. Having to pay networks for content airtime, literally inverting standard business practices where networks purchase programming, reveals how profoundly embedded danger and barbarism perceptions remain throughout the television business. This demonstrated their complete faith in the sport's possibilities, total belief they possessed something revolutionary even when industry leaders considered it untouchable and dangerous to their reputations. Then arrived the defining moment that transformed everything, the contest that rescued the entire sport. The epic battle between Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar at the Ultimate Fighter finale, and if you missed this fight, stop everything and watch it immediately. This transcended simple competition, wasn't merely two athletes fighting for 15 minutes. This became an emotional, visceral demonstration of MMA's legitimacy as authentic sport. It mesmerized audiences who'd never experienced UFC events previously. It displayed heart, technique, tactical brilliance, and pure athletic ability, completely eclipsing any remaining brutal perceptions or human cockfighting associations. This singular contest proved that MMA, under appropriate regulations and presentation, with adequate oversight, could provide unmatched entertainment and legitimate competition that boxing couldn't equal. This marked the pivotal transformation that genuinely began shifting public sentiment from too dangerous toward must-watch television toward combat sports' future evolution. The moment that fight ended, I understood everything had fundamentally shifted. That inaugural season finale moment, the immediate aftermath of Bonnar vs. Griffin, created undeniable impact for everyone watching. This footage captures that breakthrough realization, that understanding they'd achieved success. The impromptu agreement written on napkin for Ultimate Fighter's second season wasn't simple business deal or informal handshake. This represented confirmation that UFC had discovered its formula, that they'd solved the puzzle. This crucial breakthrough established MMA's television presence, initially through Spike TV, but creating opportunities everywhere, enabling further regulation, mainstream acceptance from athletic oversight, and complete public perception transformation. This proved that proper sport presentation with appropriate context and legitimate rules and regulatory supervision could overcome decades of negative safety and legitimacy perception through inherent excitement, unpredictability, and entertainment value. Actually, I'm Lawrence Epstein, and I serve as the UFC's Chief Operating Officer. This footage provides critical understanding of how UFC permanently eliminated its dangerous reputation, how they completed total transformation. Rather than resisting regulation, rather than preserving that rebel image, Dana and the Fertittas embraced oversight completely. They understood that legitimacy and consequently long-term success and mainstream acceptance required adopting standardized rules across all jurisdictions and collaborating with athletic commissions rather than opposing them. This forward-thinking strategy, this willingness to accept supervision and standardization directly answered McCain's previous safety and rules criticisms, and converted the sport from unregulated fighting into sanctioned, disciplined competition featuring proper weight divisions and substance testing. This safety and oversight commitment, this complete philosophical transformation allowed UFC to prove that instead of being human cockfighting, this represented legitimate athletic competition deserving respect.